Hi, I'm Stephanie Gilmore, Curator of Collections here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Today, as part of our Small Wonders video program, I'm going to share some of our Zephyrette collection. Before we discuss the artifacts themselves, we will take a little time to discuss the history of the Zephyrettes. First appearing on the Burlington's Denver Zephyr in 1936, Zephyrettes were female attendants aboard the train as it traveled from Chicago to Denver. Burlington executives realized that to attract a broader clientele, such as families in addition to businessmen, their trains needed a feminine touch. In 1936, Velma McPeak was hired by the Burlington to serve as supervisor of passenger train services, and she is responsible for developing the concept of the Zephyrette. Miss McPeak was a true railroad pioneer for women, as she was the first female supervisor of train passenger service. A legendary figure to her employees, Miss McPeak was beloved by her corps of Zephyrettes, as she ensured they had her support in every way. Zephyrettes typically worked on cross-country journeys, and their jobs varied from hostess to nurse, waitress, and even to babysitter and dog walker. They were very similar to airline stewardesses of the same era. They took dinner reservations for the dining car, sent telegrams for passengers, announced natural wonders and scenes along the route, cared for unaccompanied minors, and even arranged for bridge games in the parlor car. They were even equipped with suggestions for camera settings in the dome cars for rail photographers. In addition, they were responsible for taking care of medical emergencies aboard the train, along with the conductor. All in all, their primary duty was to ensure that every passenger had a pleasant and enjoyable journey. Zephyrette service was discontinued briefly during World War II due to a drop in tourist travel. However, it came back in 1949 specifically for service aboard the California Zephyr, which was jointly run by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, the Denver and Rio Grande, and the Western Pacific. Zephyrettes became a symbol of the California Zephyr, appearing in numerous ads and brochures for the railroad. They were predated by other pioneering women in the railroad industry, such as Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Harvey Girls, and the Union Pacific nurse stewardesses. The Zephyrettes, however, became one of the icons for 20th century railroads. To be a Zephyrette, a woman had to uphold certain special standards. She had to be a college graduate or a registered nurse, between 5'4" and 5'8" tall, between 24 and 28 years old, and single. According to a 1961 Zephyrette manual, quote, "Health is the first requisite for beauty, and Zephyrettes were required to maintain a pleasing appearance through managing their weight, keeping a clean and neat hairstyle, and using cosmetics in a conservative fashion. No bright rouge, lipsticks, or nail polishes were allowed. They were also never allowed to smoke or drink while in uniform, and were even encouraged to avoid passengers who were actively smoking or drinking to ensure they maintained poise and grace at all times." One particularly interesting story involves Zephyrette Helen Schwartz, who helped deliver a baby boy named Peter Zars near Grand Junction on March 1, 1955. We happen to have the Western Pacific's original employee newsletter, Mileposts, from 1955, in which this interesting story is written. Consequently, that same child had his 7th birthday aboard the California Zephyr, at which the Zephyrettes were in attendance. At the Colorado Railroad Museum, we are also very fortunate to have a fabulous collection from Mary Storrs Pittman, who served as a Zephyrette from 1951 to 1970. Mrs. Pittman also recorded an oral history about her life as a Zephyrette, which we have in our collection.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Zephyrette, Miss Storrs. We are now in the famous Feather River Canyon. Perhaps some of you would like me to tell you a little bit about it. The Feather River received its name from Don Luis Arguello, the Spanish conquistador who discovered it in 1820 and was intrigued by the vast quantities of wild pigeon feathers that floated on its ripples. Rio de las Plumas, he called it in Castilian. River of the Feathers.
Like her other Zephyrette counterparts, Mrs. Pittman had many interesting stories from her 18.5 years of service. She was very fond of Velma McPeak and recounts in her oral history how Mrs. McPeak came to Hannibal, Missouri to personally interview her for the Zephyrette job in 1951. McPeak was very impressed by Pittman and hired her right away. Pittman would spend the next 2 decades alternating working as a Zephyrette and as a school teacher. Within Pittman's collection are dining car menus, brochures, birth keys, postcards, telegrams, and much more. She also kept several notes about her journeys in these many scrapbook pages. Of particular interest is this 1952 letter from a passenger to Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Vice President J.J. Alms regarding Pittman's help with the passenger's son. It reads, "It was my pleasure to come east on the California Zephyr, leaving San Francisco on Friday, August 15th, and to experience what I consider unusual courtesy which should certainly be brought to your attention. Not long after the train left the Pacific coast, our young boy became ill, and of course, we were quite concerned as to what the nature of the illness might be. Your Zephyrette, Mrs. Storrs, and your Pullman conductor, Mr. Greenman, were not only sympathetic but were most cooperative and secured the services of a nurse at Grand Junction and a doctor at Glenwood Springs. While you may consider such services as only included in the normal duties of your personnel, they impressed us as rather unusual in our experience, and I would certainly be remiss if I did not express to you my very real appreciation. Yours very truly, signed Donald P. Jones." Mary Pittman served as a Zephyrette right up until the California Zephyr had its last run in March of 1970. As her friend and fellow Zephyrette Nellie O'Grady said about being a Zephyrette, quote, "I love it, even with all the trials and tribulations one must experience now and then when serving the public. Train travelers are wonderful people and I enjoy being with them. And when you stop to think that I average about 15,000 miles each month, I have traveled over 1 million miles aboard the California Zephyr." When Nellie said this, she had been a Zephyrette for a mere 7 years. Having worked nearly 2 decades as a Zephyrette, it is estimated that Mary Pittman may have traveled over 3 million miles aboard one of the 20th century's most iconic trains.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your Zephyrette, Miss Storrs. On behalf of the Western Pacific, Rio Grande, and Burlington Railroads, I welcome you aboard the California Zephyr. In case you are not acquainted with some of the unusual features of this train, I should like to tell you something about them. This public address system will be used during the day and evening hours in announcing station stops, meal periods, and to call your attention to some of the points of special interest. To ensure the reception of these announcements in bedrooms and roomettes, the occupants of those rooms should keep their radio panel at station number 4. The buffet car, which is located behind the coaches, offers beverage refreshments, sandwiches, coffee, and snack items, and is open now until 10:45 p.m. for service to all passengers. Refreshment service is available in the observation car for sleeping car passengers. The diner is located between the coaches and the sleepers. Dinner is served on a reservation basis in order that tedious standing in line may be avoided. Thank you for your attention.
We hope you've enjoyed our brief history of the Zephyrettes and our collection highlights. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Commenting and sharing in particular may qualify as virtual engagements for important funding programs like the SCFD.